All right, my friends. So it is wonderful to see all of you. We find ourselves on Mem Dalid Amud Aleph 44a. Is my sound coming through clearly? You can hear me?
Yes, very good.
All right, let me open up with a question for tonight and we'll answer it at the end. Let's say it is Hoshana Rabbah and you come to shul and they're selling Aravos for I forgot what we do. Is it $5 a bundle, $10 a bundle? Maybe inflation pushes it up. It's $5. So so the question is I should probably know this because I think Rabbi Cohen every year tells me to make the sign because I'm at the 6:30 or 6 o'clock. Um we did pretty well this year, I think, on we did a good job. So the question is should let's say there's no Hoshanos bundles around. Can you take the Aravos from your lulav and use them for Hoshanos? That's question number one. Question number two, let's say there are Hoshanos provided. Can you use the Aravos from your lulav instead? Question number three, maybe should you use the Aravos in your lulav instead? And depending on the answer on this, has big implications for big Arava. Right, you have big pharma, so there's the big Arava industry. And I'm sure they genetically engineer the Aravos that they all have to disintegrate within a day and a half of use, so that way you have to buy more of them, right? This is the whole scheme behind it. So hold me to it. There's a great piece in Chashuge Chemed that I was just learning, and he addresses precisely this point. All right, so Mem Dalet Amud Aleph, we're on 44a. And basically, what we're going to be dealing with tonight is the distinction between the mitzvah of the lulav, by lulav I mean the Dalet Minan, the four species, versus the arava. Now, arava is one of the four species, but meaning the Hoshanis, taking the aravos and we'll talk about in the Gemara what precisely it is. Is it marching around the Mizbeach inside the temple, inside the Beis Hamikdash, or is it standing it up? But basically, two distinct mitzvos. You'll recall that in our previous year, we elaborated on the Mishnah, which said that if Shabbos coincides with the first day of Sukkot, back in the day, if it coincides with day one of Sukkot, you take the Dalamim no matter what. And then back in the day, if Shabbos coincided with Hoshana Rabbah, you would still take the Aravos on Hoshana Rabbah. Today, though, the Arba Minim do not supersede Shabbos, and even on the first day, and Shabbos calendarically just never corresponds with Hoshana Rabbah. So we need not even concern ourselves with that.
Rabbi,
That's what
can
we
I ask
basically
you a
covered last
question?
time.
Can I
So,
ask you a question about this?
sure.
Are there any special requirements about the aravot that you use for Hoshanas that are different from the ones that go in your lulav?
So this is precisely the question I want to get to at the end. Right? Usually the bundles, I believe, come with five aravos in them, which is more than aravos you have in your lulav. But five seems to be rooted more in the Kabbalistic idea than in the mitzvah per se, and that's what we'll get to. All right, so we are just shy of a quarter way down. We're at the words Amar le Abaye le Rava. Okay, so probably still the first page in Art Scroll. Amar le Abai le Rava. So Abai said to Rava, Ma'ishna luav davdinan le shiva zeich mikdash. Right? We're no longer doing a history lesson. This is modern day. I mean, Abai and Rava are not modern day, but their practices already at that point in time reflect what we do nowadays. So Abai asked Rava, why is it that nowadays we take the lulav for 7 days, Zecher LeMikdash. Umayshna Arava de lo Avdin la Shiva Zecher LeMikdash. But the Aravos, and that's true, we do Hoshanas nowadays with our Lulavim and our Srogim, but we only do one Hoshana Rabbah, right? We only do one where we take the Hoshanas around and march around the Torah being held at the Bima, which is Zecher LeMikdash. So why is it that, both of them were done for 7 days inside the Beis Hamikdash back in the day. So why is that if both of them are still taken nowadays in commemoration, Lulav we do for 7 days, all the days of Sukkot, but except for Shabbos. But when it comes to Hoshanas, we only do it on Hoshana Rabbah. Samarle, Oh, that's because you're being silly. The aravos are already integrated into the lulav, so there's no need to do a separate enactment for the aravos. Amar le, ahu mishum lulav udaka avidle, v'chitema daka megavale v'hader megavale. Do you think people are just picking up their lulav twice, once for the four species and once for the mitzvah of arava? But no one does that. There's no way that that's actually how we're fulfilling it. So back to the drawing board. Why don't we get 7 days of Hoshana Rabbah instead? So Hachi Amar Rav Zvid Mishmei Rava. Lulav de Oraisa of Dinan Shiva Zecher LaMikdash. Lulav, which is mandated biblically, right? We have an explicit verse. Again, it's not clear on the identities of the four species, but it's clear that it is a biblical mandate. So that we take Zecher LaMikdash. Arava Drabana lo avdin Zecher LaMikdash, but Arava, which is only a simple rabbinical enactment, there was no the priority of it didn't have to be prioritized. One day, one Hoshana Rabbah is sufficient. So the Gemara now is going to question, what do you mean it's just a plain old rabbinical enactment to take the Arava? It might not be explicitly in the Torah, but it's more than just a simple Gezerah Midrabanan. Takana Midrabanan. Salaman, Ilema La'abashal, Hamar Arvi Nachal Ksiv Shtaim, Achas Lula Achas Mikdash. One opinion is Abashal says that it says Arve Nachal, Arve is plural, once for the mitzvah of Aravos for a lulav, and once for the mitzvah of Arava. So there, strike one, according to Abashal, the source for our Ravos is actually from the. Oh, I see. I just did like a thumbs up on my screen. Wow. Okay. Do you guys see that? Is it just on my screen, or do you guys see
Yeah,
that also?
no,
You
it's
see,
on my
they need like
now.
the Yeshiva Shtum Dip emoji now. Oh wow. Anyway, sorry about that. So according to Abba it Arava very much is rooted in the Torah. And even according to the Rabbanan, either Rabbanan, Hilchasa Gemirila, they still believe that it was an actual Masorah that we got from Moshe Rabbeinu. So again, that's a higher level than just a plain old rabbinical enactment. So here we are dismissing Arava, giving it just 1 day nowadays, but it's not just some any old rabbinical enactment. It's either Doraisa or it's pretty close to Doraisa, it sounds like. And this is supported by a tradition from Rabbi Yochanan, a name of Rabbi Nechunya, that Esther Netios, this is a law about Shemitah, that if you have 10 young saplings within, I think, a certain area within each other, basically you're allowed to treat them during the probation period before Shemitah. Anyway, Arava v'nisa chamayim, and the mitzvah of Arava, that's what we're talking about, and the water libation, halacha Moshe Sinai. It's a tradition we got from Moshe at Sinai. So again, that might not be explicitly in the Torah, but halacha Moshe Sinai, tradition that Moshe at Sinai gave us, that's pretty high up. And I would think, I'm speaking on behalf of the Gemara here, the Gemara is saying is, we would think that that would still be enough of an impetus to give it more than just 1 day of remembrance nowadays. So Ela Amar Azimish Rava. Rather, what's the clarification here? Lulav de Islay Iker min HaTorah begevulin avdinan le'shiva zecher mikdash. Lulav has a mitzvah oraisa not just in the Beis Hamikdash, but outside the Beis Hamikdash, elsewhere, beyond the borders of the Beis Hamikdash or beyond Yerushalayim. There is a oraisa obligation. So for that, even outside the Beis Hamikdash, at least is 1 day that on a biblical level, no matter where you are, you have to take the lulav. Therefore, we said everywhere has to take it for 7 days, zecher lamikdash. However, arava deleisla ikir min haTorah bigvulen, but arava, which yes, inside the Beis Hamikdash, it has a biblical or near biblical source, but outside of the Beis Hamikdash, it does not have any biblical basis. So therefore, lo avdin and shiva zeich mikdash. Therefore, we do not give it 7 days nowadays. Nonetheless, we still do Hoshanas every day of Sukkot, but Shabbos we don't bring anything, or we just kind of stay at our seats. And on the rest of the days, we take the Arba Minim. So we don't do the Hoshanas like they did back then, except for one day, which is Hoshana Rabbah. All right. Any questions, my friends? Very good. Going forward, now we're just going to delve a little bit more deeply into when we talk about the mitzvah of Hoshanas. What is the mitzvah of Hoshanas? So again, we're a little bit biased because we kind of see how it's done in shul nowadays, but we might be making certain assumptions after the smoke clears. But it wasn't always clear precisely what the mitzvah was. Amarei Shlakish. Kohanim bali muma nichnasim bein ulmizbeach kedei lotzeis ba'arava. Even Kohanim who have a blemish, who generally cannot qualify for service in the Beis HaMikdash, they will enter into the building of the Beis HaMikdash and stand before the initial chamber and the Mizbeach. They'll kind of be on the sidelines, but they'll still be there fulfilling the mitzvah of taking the Arava. Amar le Rav Yochanan, mi Amra. Rav Yochanan says, who said this? What does it mean? The Gemara says, what's it mean? Who said that? Mi Amra. What do you mean? Who said this? Ha'iu Amra. The Rav Asi Rav Yochanan. Didn't you say it? The Rav Asi Rav Yochanan. Nishu Rabbi Nechunin Ish Begas Beis Chorasan. What we just said. Esenetios. Arava. Venisa Chamayim. The water libation. Halacha Moshe Sinai. What do you mean? Why, Rabbi Yochanan, didn't you just teach us that there is a tradition for Moshe Rabbeinu himself to take the Aravos in the Beis Hamikdash? So why are you so surprised to see Kohanim, even blemished Kohanim, taking the mitzvah seriously? So Ella mi amra. Rather, what was he asking? Who says benetila? Who said the mitzvah was to take the lula, take the aravos and march around with them? Dilma bizakifa. Maybe it's just you're supposed to stand it up next to the mizbeach. So mi amar b'bali mumen dilma b'tmimin. Who says that it would be bali mumen, that it would be kohanim with blemishes? Maybe it was kohanim who did not have blemishes, because the assumption Rashi explains, the assumption is that if the mitzvah is to take the Rava march with it, so then it sounds like every Kohen has an individual obligation to do it. However, if they do march with it, but the main mitzvah, the main obligation is afterwards of setting it aside next to the Mizbeach, that's something Rashi says, the Kohen echad zokva yidei hakol. One Kohen, in theory, could just be appointed to do all of it. There's no obligation for everyone to do it. So the idea is the only reason that blemished Kohanim would go out of their way to participate is because they understood there to be an individual obligation, because they understood that the main mitzvah was the taking and the marching around of the Aravos as opposed to setting it up. That's the point that Rabbi Yochanan was challenging. And as we saw in the previous week, that's a machlokus. As far as the Gemara is concerned, I don't think it ever gets fully resolved. Okay, that was section number 2 for tonight. And now we get to our final section, Itmar. And this is basically, again, going back to the question of the origin story. What's the origin of taking the Aravos, of Hoshanas? So we're going to delve a little bit more deeply into it. Amar Rav Itmar. So originally we said in the Gemara that the Aravos, well, this is going to be the answer actually at the end, that I'm going to spoiler alert, there's going to be a distinction between the obligation of the Arava vis-a-vis the Beis HaMikdash versus vis-a-vis outside the Beis HaMikdash. We mentioned earlier that inside the Beis HaMikdash, there's a biblical or near biblical basis, but there's only a rabbinical basis outside the Beis HaMikdash. So the question is, what is, when we say rabbinical basis, rabbinical basis, I'm saying, is because it's vague. What do we mean by that? So take a look over here. Itmar, Rav Yochanan Yeshua ben Levi, Chad Amar Arava Yisod Neviim, Chad Amar Arava Minhag Neviim. One says that Arava is a Yisod Neviim, meaning, and if we look at Rashi, Rashi says, what's Yisod Neviim? Takanas Neviim Achronim. It was an institution of the latter Neviim, referring to Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi, along with the Anshe Knesset Gedola. V'chad amar arava minhag neviim, just a custom. What's a minhag neviim? So again, Rashi helps us out here. Rashi tells us, meaning hinhigu esa'am lo tiknu lahem, meaning the people. It was a grassroots. It wasn't a top down. It was a bottom up. People decided to do it on their own, and then the chachamim, the neviim, they put their what's the word, imprimatur on it. Right? Did I pronounce that correctly? It's pronounced imprimatur also, or is it imprimatur? Tovira imprimatur?
No, imprimatur.
Imprimatur, because okay, so I've heard imprimatur, and someone corrected me because I was always saying imprimatur because that sounds
That's right.
more naturally. Okay, because one time I checked it on dictionary.com and they pronounced it and it said imprimatur. I'm like, I've been saying it wrong the whole time. Okay, so the minhag seems to be the same imprimatur. Okay, all right. So is it yesod or is it minhag? That's the question. What do we go with? This is similar, by the way. Something called Chumer de Rabbi Zera. Chumer de Rabbi Zera basically is very important in the laws of Nida because it basically said that basically a lot of the stringencies nowadays that we treat a nida like a zava. It all traces back to that sugya. But the funny part is that it says, if I have the language correctly, "Chmir benos Yisrael atzman," that the women themselves took on these stringencies, and then one understanding is post facto the rabbis gave their approval to it, and it became a formal gezerah. So I remember one time when I was at YU, there's a friend of mine who would like every year he would host the Purim Suda, and there was like some YU guys there, and he invites some Chovevei people over. That's Rabbi Avi Weiss's place in Riverdale, and the question was he would always do like an irreverent icebreaker question. So it was like, if you could repeal one gezerah, what would it be? And so one of the Chove guys said, I would repeal Chumer to Rabbi Zera. And I'm like, you call yourself the feminist? What do you mean? This is one of the few gezeras that the women themselves actually took initiative on making. So who are you to come along and repeal it? Um, Point being is, some gezeras begin as a grassroots movement. Now, you might be asking, okay, top down, bottom up, who cares? So my nafkamina. So Rashi thought we might ask that question. And Rashi tells us, the nafkamina, blobai bracha. The question is whether you make a bracha on this or not. Delekala Meimar Vitzivanu, because if it was instituted by the Chachamim, we could say Vitzivanu, that we were commanded. Wait, God didn't command us. But God did command us. God says Lo Sasor. The pasuk of Lo Sasor is the biblical commandment to adhere to the rabbis. So if the rabbis instituted it top down, then we make a bracha because we could say vitzivanu. That's a mitzvah to adhere to the words of the rabbis. But if it was just a minhag, we would not recite a bracha on it. And by the way, this has echoes of the debate about whether to say brachos on Hallel. We get to distinctions between Ashkenazim versus Sephardim. What happens when Hallel is just, a minhag? Can you make a bracha on it? So, okay, just index that one for later. Back to our feature presentation in the Gemara. Tistayim to Rabbi Yochanan to Amar Yisod Neviim. It must be Rabbi Yochanan who advocates, who's a proponent of the idea that the mitzvah of Arava was instituted top down by the Neviim. To Amar Ravavo Amar Yochanan, Arava Yisod Neviim who? Oh, what do you know? Black on white, right there. Rabbi Avo said in the name Rabbi Yochanan, Arava Yisod Neviimu. Tistayim. Seems like an open shut case. We have a report that that's exactly what Rabbi Yochanan said. However, Amalei Rav Zir Rabbi Avo Miyamar Rav Yochanan Hachi. Did Rabbi Yochanan truly say this? Because this would seemingly be in conflict with another thing that Rabbi Yochanan taught us. V'amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Nechunya Ishbegas Beis Chorasan. Sounding familiar? Eser Netios Arava V'Nisach Hamayim. Halacha Moshe Sinai. Wait a minute, didn't Rabbi Yochanan tell us that the origin of Arava is not from just some later Nevi'im? I mean, later Nevi'im, Bechilas Kvodim, very holy people. But I think even they would admit Moshe Rabbeinu outranks them. So didn't Rabbi Yochanan say that Arava comes from none other than the top Navi himself, Moshe Rabbeinu? So this is a fascinating lashon right here. Ishtomim kishachada. He was silent for a moment and he contemplated it. Is that remarkable, right? It's like, let me actually think about it. Yeah. I mean, I assume rabbis do it all the time. It's interesting why over here they say this. I didn't look into it. But he thought about it. Va'amar, shachum v'chazru v'yastim. Oh, he's like, I got it. They forgot it. It was instituted by Moshe Rabbeinu, but everyone forgot about it. And then came the later Nevi'im and they reinstituted it. Ah, we've seen things like that before. So me, Amar Rav Yochanan Hachi, is this true that Rav Yochanan could subscribe to this reconciliation? From Rav Yochanan, Dilachon Amri, Dilahon. Very cryptic, but Rashi fills us in. What it's saying is that when Rav Yochanan was talking, he was very charif. He was speaking to the sages of Israel, and he was saying to them, I thought you guys, Kimi Tzion Teitzi Sora, right? You ever see it like on the Mizrahi advertisements? They always say, Kimi Tzion Teitzi Sora. That's like their pitch, like pay for our Scotland residences to get flights into America to speak at your shuls because Torah emanates from Israel. So Rav Yochanan said, I thought that the Torah emanates from Eretz Yisrael. But then I realized Dilahonhi, that actually the sages of Bavel did a much better job maintaining the Masorah and maintaining and knowing the Masorah of the halachos, which, by the way, we are reading the Talmud Bavli after all. So this, right? I think we know the reason we do the Talmud Bavli. One of the reasons is that it's later than the Yerushalmi, so it could account for other shitos. But also, arguably, the Bavli sages, one might argue, had a superior maintenance of the tradition. That's certainly what Rabbi Yochanan would say, and certainly makes sense that it's published in the Talmud Bavli. Anyway, that just occurred to me right now. So what's the point? The point being is, Rav Yochanan said, "What we didn't lose our Masorah, we kept our Masorah." So you can't give me an answer that we lost the Masorah and then the Nevi'im had to reinstate it. We maintained our Masorah through and through from Moshe Rabbeinu. So again, how do I reconcile this? I don't get it. Is the Arava's origins from Sinai, which is nearly biblical, or is it later institution by the rabbis? What do you know? We have a great answer based on what we learned earlier this evening. Lo kasha, kam b'mikdash, kam b'gvulen. Taking the Arava in the Beis HaMikdash, that comes all the way from Moshe Rabbeinu himself. Taking the Arava outside the Beis HaMikdash, that is just Yesod Nevi'im. That was just instituted by later Nevi'im. And again, like we learned earlier, that's the reason why we only have one day of taking the Aravos as a separate mitzvah nowadays, as opposed to all days, because we no longer have the Beis HaMikdash, and taking it outside in Gvul and outside the Beis HaMikdash is not even Halacha Moshe Misinai. It's a later Nevi'im instituting it at best. All right. Now with that, my friends, we shall return to our opening question of the evening.
Yeah. Can I ask you something about what you just said?
By all means.
I don't understand the concept of it could be a Torah mandate and it could not be. To me, it's either yes or no. I'm a little confused about that.
So there's this great essay. I looked at it years ago from Rav Usher Weiss. And I don't want to give a specific number, but I think he identifies upwards of 20 different tiers. We usually think of things as, look, either it's Doraisa or it's Darabanan. It's either, right?
Yeah.
So he basically has a hierarchy. It's I need to find his essay again. It's a whole hierarchy where there are things which are even within Doraisa, there are things that are explicitly written in the Torah. There are things that are learned from a drasha. There are things that are right, and then in terms of things that are not explicitly written in the Torah, there's halacha Moshe Misinai. There's, as we saw, a gezer from the Nevi'im, a min Nevi'im. So it's amazing. He has like this whole entire hierarchy, basically going from the highest biblical to a minhag ba'alma or something all the way at the bottom. So we always just say, is it Doraisa, is it Darabanan? But the truth is, there's different Kabbalah also. There could be something that's not in the Torah, but what if it's in the Sifrei Nevi'im? What if something is not just a random gezerah, but what if it's an ismachta? And a smachta, when it's introduced by the rabbis, but maybe when the rabbis hang their hat on a pasuk, it's not just simply a good mnemonic or memory tool, but it's actually has a higher level of authority than just a random takana midrabanan. So all these things actually matter because when you pit them against each other, something that is Yesod Nevi'im versus Minhag Nevi'im, the Yesod Nevi'im might win out. Again, I don't have like good examples on hand of like you can imagine like a wrestling match like on this side of the ring we have Yesod Nevi'im, this side Minhag Nevi'im, and
Yeah.
I was the reason this is on my mind. I was listening to the New York Times has this podcast called The Daily. So when I was going shopping, I was listening to it, and they were doing a whole deep dive into the whole mixed martial arts scene and how it goes with politics and everything. So this is like all in my head right now. Anyway, it was fascinating. By the way, I don't know if you listened to The Daily. It was I usually don't recommend. I'm not like a chassid of the New York Times for obvious reasons, but their daily podcast is really good. I don't get a commission for you if you listen to it. Anyway, to answer your question, Phyllis, there's a lot more out there than just simply what's that word that they use nowadays? When you have two things, not duality, binary, right? Like they say nowadays, it's not just the binary. It's not just the rice and derabanan. There's a spectrum. And I know I say this with a smirk on my face, but actually here it's true. Okay.
Yeah.
Ain't
Kind of
come up
makes you a little
Mahara.
uncomfortable.
Right. Okay. Well, I hear why. Anyway,
The
back.
other thing, the other thing I meant when I asked you about the if there are any different restrictions for the Hoshanas um, all during Sukkot and the ones specifically for Hoshana Rabbah, I didn't mean uh, the number. I meant in terms of the condition, like you wouldn't want to have dried out
Yeah.
Hoshanas
I
for
mean, the thing is,
Hoshana Rabbah.
if it's so dried out that it disintegrates in your hands, then it's like it's not there.
Yeah, so you
Doesn't
have
have
to have
right.
fresh.
So
Yes.
okay. So let's get to the answer. The answer is right. So again, the question is, do I have to buy the $5 Hoshana packet? So that's the question. I mean, I think the money supposedly goes to the shul tzedakah. Actually, I have no clue where it goes to. All I know is that it goes in like this little wicker basket, which then goes to Joseph, and then Joseph puts it somewhere, and it's at that point it's Lemus Yonim, and I have no clue, but I'm sure it goes to a good cause. Um, anyway, so here's the answer. Here's the answer. I was about to make some joke about the building, but I held myself back, Toby. You'll be proud of me. Okay. Here's our answer. So the Shulchan Aruch says that you like based on what our Gemara said, you can't simply pick up your lulav once and say, "Hineni muchon mezuman." I'm now fulfilling the mitzvah of the four species, and now "Hineni muchon mezuman." I'm now fulfilling the mitzvah of the arava. It doesn't work that way. But the Mishnah Brura comments on there and says, however, im hitir agado shalula v'acher netila, if after you take the four species, you then take the aravos out, you could be yotze the mitzvah of arava with them. But just from the Mishnah Brura, it's not clear whether that's is it recommended, is it not recommended? It's not so clear whether it's like lichatchila or b'diavad. The Bikurei Yaakov says that actually taking it out is lichatchila. Not just that it's permissible, that, oh, I didn't get they ran out of Hoshanis, and also, I don't see why you can't use the same Hoshanis again. Again, these are things that like Big Arava doesn't want to tell you. So you keep buying more of them. But he says it's actually lichatchila. And you know what it's similar to? I love it. It's similar to Erev Tavshilin. So we prepare an Erev Tavshilin so we could cook from Yontif to prepare for Shabbos. And what are we supposed to do with that? Again, it doesn't have to be dafka, an egg, but let's just go with the typical matzah and an egg. What are you supposed to do with that matzah and egg afterwards on
Eat it on
Shabbos?
Shabbos. Eat it.
Yeah,
On Shabbos.
ideally you'll eat it on Shabbos with your Suda. So the idea is that something that was used for one mitzvah it's actually a commendable thing to use it yet again for another mitzvah. So similar idea here. Ah, you were just say the mitzvah of dalaminim with this arava. How beautiful would it be to use those same aravos for Hoshanis? Um, and you might think the base Yosef deals with the question. Now, usually we say that when it comes to Tashmishe Kedusha, we learned this in Megillah together. When you're using Tashmishe Kedusha, like for instance, let's say I have a Me'il for Sefer Torah that covers the Torah. So I can't then use it as I don't know, to cover a stender or something else, right? We say, like we learned on Hanukkah, Malim Bekodesh Marid. You can only go up in Kedusha, not down. So you might think to say, wait a minute, didn't we just learn in our Gemara tonight that the lulav is explicit in the basically explicit in the Torah, and the aravas is it maybe it's still Risa-ish in the temple, certainly not out of the temple, it's certainly not. So you might think, wait a minute, how can I take the aravos which were used for the mitzvah of lulav, which is doraisa, arguably, at least in the mikdash, or at the first day outside the mikdash, and then use it for a lower mitzvah of arava? So to that, the Beis Yosef explains the dafka tashmish did kedusha aser lahor mikdusha. So only tashmishe kedusha you can't lower down. Aval tashmish the mitzvah mutter. This is an important distinction. People always ask, like, what do I need to put in shemus? So there's a difference between tashmishe kedusha versus tashmishe mitzvah. Tashmishe kedusha are things that have Hashem's name on it, a sefer Torah, a mezuzah, tefillin. Those are things that are tashmishe kedusha, and when you're done with them, they need to actually be buried. You put them in shemus, hence shemus, shemos, name of God. But when it comes to something like tzitzis, when it comes to lulavim, they are tashmishe mitzvah. They don't need to be buried. They just need to be discarded in a respectful manner. So once you're already a tashmishe mitzvah, there's no issue of like using it for a lulav and then using it for a supposedly not as high level mitzvah of arava. That's only applies to Tashmishe Kedusha. We don't have these issues when it comes to Tashmishe Mitzvah. So what's fascinating is that the Bikuri Yaakov says if you want to be frugal and not pay the $5 for those shadas, I mean, I guess you could say you could give a $5 donation to the shul anyway, but maybe there's a higher madrega. I mean, again, I guess nothing's stopping you from taking the Hoshanas and taking the and then taking the Rabbis from your lulav, putting it together and giving a nice big whack. But this is exclusive information that you only get for coming to the Gemara shir because I'll never share this publicly in shul because then they'll decapitate me for it. So, Judd, you'll make an announcement at Minyan tomorrow.
No, but my question is, unless I missed it, where do you differentiate between the quantity of 5 for the Ravos versus the 2?
I think the 5 was a Kabbal. I have to check, but I
2
think
or
it was
3?
Kabbalistic in origin.
Isn't it 3?
Well, there you go. So that's I mean it's 2 on your lulav, but I think
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
I
Oh,
think the
3 adult.
5 I think the 5 was I have to check, but I think the 5 was Kabbalistic.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, there you go. Once you have
Mhm.
2, it's already arve now.
It's really plural. Okay.
It's already plural at that point.
Yeah.
All right, my friends. Well, if you
Huh.
remember what we just learned, come next Sukkot, you deserve to use that. And remember, it's not a heter; it's a mitzvah.
Yes.
That's the best part. You're frimmered that way. But yes, we always encourage donations to the shul. Okay. Anyway, okay, I was Yotze. All right. Have a wonderful Shabbos, and Toby again
Thank you.
wishing
You too.
Mother Shabbat Shahav and Aliyah.
Thank you.
All right, shkayach everyone.